Death Forest is a 2014 Japanese horror movie based off the game with the same name that asks the incredibly important question of, what if we made Slender Man, but Japanese? An idea that apparently warranted the existence of a movie coming out the exact same year as the game, which honestly isn't all that surprising when you take into account how much of a cult underground hit the video game was. Whether that's because it was terrifying, hilarious, or both, I'm not really sure, but I'll leave that up to you. The series has spawned 5 separate movies based on the idea of the Death Forest game, with the original developer of it, Kazz, supposedly having no involvement with them whatsoever. The series that has become somewhat obscure online, not quite bordering on lost media, but despite there being 5 entries in it, the movies aren't exactly easy to come by, until recently when they came directly into my possession. And upon starting my slightly dubious copy of the first movie, it becomes apparent that the subtitles make absolutely no sense whatsoever, and aren't exactly remedied by downloading a different file. The new subtitles are certainly an improvement, but the English is still about as broken as my current mental state, meaning that I'm actively translating the translation as I'm going through it. Our only 65-minute adventure begins with a character named Kazuki, the main protagonist from the game, driving through a forest on his motorcycle as he's come to lay flowers at the foot of a tree because he really just loves nature that much. And once it begins to get dark, he finds himself in the rather peculiar predicament of being entirely consumed by a giant floating head. I hate it when that happens. After watching a man getting some head in the woods, it cuts to a group of friends drinking in a cabin, Saki, Takashi, Masaya and Ayaki all gearing down for their final night together by absolutely terrifying Saki by playing a prank involving turning out the lights and committing assault. The next day, right before leaving, the group are approached by 2 police officers as they really want to show them this picture of a cute guy they found. Kazuki's been reported missing, and only a day later, they're out here looking for him. After saying they haven't seen him, they start their journey home, but first decide to stop at a local restaurant for some food, owned by a woman who proceeds to immediately stare them down, because it's just kind of funny. And as they're about to leave, she informs them of a helpful shortcut through the forest that definitely doesn't involve human-consuming floating heads, because that would be silly. After passing Kazuki's motorcycle and not enforcing the finders keepers rule, their car eventually breaks down a little further down the road as they're stranded with no phone service deep in the middle of the forest. At least they're stranded in Japan and not England, because that would suck. Needing water for the car's radiator as they forgot to hydrate it, they split up in 2s in hopes of finding a water source. Saki and Takashi, and Masaya and Ayaka. After a while of walking through the wilderness, Saki suddenly hears a voice in her head, and much to her surprise, it isn't Tom DeLonge. And after looking around for a member of Blink-182, they suddenly see something unsettling in the distance that causes them to hurry back to their car, as apparently they aren't a fan of trees. Masaya and Ayaka, on their desperate search for hydration, find themselves in an abandoned factory, which isn't actually all that abandoned, as they're suddenly attacked by a hiding Kazuki, because this is his factory and he found it first. After getting a look at them and suddenly deciding that he isn't really in the mood for a double homicide, he decides that he's in the mood for theft instead, as they find him back at their car trying to start it. With both groups making it back at the same time and trying to subdue him, Kazuki pretends to be passed out after being manhandled by a couple of males, before Masaya hits him on the back of the head to knock him out for real. Saki recognizes him as the man from the police picture, so Takashi decides to walk off alone to try and find some help, before we see something absolutely terrifying watching him from the distance. A Caucasian. Kazuki eventually wakes up from forced nap time, and Saki informs him that the incredibly efficient Japanese police are already out looking for him. And we see said police arriving at the woman's restaurant to ask about the disappearances, and upon being told no by the woman, one of the officers proceeds to give her perhaps the nastiest stank eye the world has ever seen, because apparently he's not too fond of women. Back with the guys at the car, while looking through the pictures that they've taken on the trip, Ayaka makes the strange discovery of something in one of the pictures that Saki recognizes from the forest earlier with Takashi. Kazuki tells them that there's much more to worry about out there than their photobombing vitamin D deficient friend, because there's an unusually large Japanese person. And with Takashi taking too long to save them for their liking, everyone but Kazuki gets out to try and follow him. And after not long of walking, they make the rather gruesome discovery on the side of the road of an uncharacteristically happy Japanese person feasting on his body. And with cannibalism being something generally frowned upon in Japan, they immediately turn around and proceed to run away, immediately followed by the creature taking a bite out of Masaya because he just looks so yummy. After receiving the forbidden hickey, he then shines his torch to see a giant floating head as it begins slowly turning its face to his direction. And once it's aimed directly at him, it dashes towards him and bites off his head with perhaps the most hilariously underwhelming sound effect I think I've ever heard. Ayaka runs to hide in the abandoned factory that she was in earlier, while quickly being followed behind by the white creature. After popping her head out to see if the coast is clear, she learns that the coast is very much not clear as he's right in front of her. Saki makes it back to the car and tells Kazuki that she saw his bike a little further up the road before he proceeds to tell her what he was actually doing here. His sister previously passed away in a car crash on this road, and the surviving driver told the authorities that right before he crashed, he saw a weird-looking white person in the middle of Japan, strangely not wearing an anime shirt. Ayaka makes it back to the car after being uncomfortably close to some dude's face, and they realize that they've been safe in the car so far because the creatures won't come anywhere near the light. Well, you know, except for that giant floating head that very much came near the light as it consumed Messiah. But with the car battery draining because of the constant use of the headlights, they know that they haven't got much time left, and Kazuki puts it on full beam to reveal a group of the white creatures before immediately proceeding to get out of the car and sprint in the opposite direction, because screw those girls. Fortunately for them, they appear to be safe for now, as the lights are directly on the creatures, causing them to be frozen in place. But unfortunately for them, Ayaka, worried that Saki is going to run off with the guy who's literally already run off, takes their one and only emergency flare and tries to make a run for the tunnel. Keyword being try, as our friendly neighborhood Japanese friend who ate all of their vegetables to grow up to be big and strong appears for a nice little snack. The car battery then dies, leaving Saki with nothing but her phone torch for defense, as she's forced to make a run for it as these extremely happy creatures begin to surround the car. And right as it seems it's going to be the unfortunate end for Saki, she's suddenly saved by Kazuki, who managed to make it back to his bike before coming back to save her. And only her, I guess, because he only has the one extra seat. After speeding off with Kazuki on his Suzuki, they very quickly find themselves being pursued by the giant floating creature, bringing a new meaning to the term roadhead. But using the flash from the camera, Saki's able to slow down the creature as it desperately tries to attack them. And after giving me an epileptic seizure in a tunnel, it then cuts to sunrise, with the creature, who has a surprising lack of hair physics, being nowhere to be seen. With Saki and Kazumi surviving their run-in with something that shouldn't be able to run, we see the police officers as they return to the woman's restaurant, with one of the officers once again giving his world-famous stank eye to her, except not physically her, but a picture of her that greatly resembles the giant floating head creature. With the first installment of 5 coming to an end, based off a video game that can literally be beaten in under 10 minutes, it begs the question, who would create such a thing? Well, a developer named Kazz, who supposedly had absolutely no involvement with the movies, after coming up with the idea of creating a game, after messing around with image manipulation in Photoshop of a picture of his face, and realizing that he looks kinda creepy. The game being something that comes from a classic age of internet horror games, with the likes of Slender Man and a Screaming Swedish Man completely taking the internet by storm, with Death Forest being something that genuinely managed to cause a scare with some of the people who played it back then, which is honestly quite commendable when you take into account that it's a game about being chased by a giant PNG. Playing as Kazumi, Death Forest takes place in Logan Paul's favourite forest, Akigahara, and much like many of the viral horror games from the time, the premise is fairly simple and revolves around you trying to find the items to start your motorcycle and leave while conserving your flashlight battery before the various demons manage to catch you and blast your ears with demonscream.mp3. So before this video comes to an end, I'd like to give a massive shout out and a big thank you to all of the YouTube members and patrons, the people who every month continue to support the channel, despite YouTube making it incredibly obvious that they're not exactly fond of the type of content I make. If you yourself are interested in becoming a YouTube member or a patron, not only are you just generally being a great support to the channel, but you get access to a few little perks like the private Discord server, where you then get links to uncensored versions of all videos going forward. So starting off with this week's new YouTube member signups, a massive thank you to Doomslayer66, Amilana, Econut C, Josephine F, Gen 1 Grey, Rojinoni, Otago Chan, Travis Pribliski, Drakenblut04, Loki Doki Doki, Zani Murno, Keegan Neely, Dave, Cartnor, Dennis, Daniel Combs, Cake, Daniel B, Nathaniel Murphy, Jefferson Norup, Meow QC, Emil Nielsen, Danny Woods, Gualberto Carrion, A7Hori7Y, Batgirl727, Caleb Herbert, Macho, Jenna, Brian Dubber, Jenna Lee Franco, Fabrico Rua Sanchez, and Fundy25. Now heading over to this week's new Patreon signups, a massive thank you to Simeon Gonad, Kenny, Daniel Nunali, Doomsday Adams, Whitner MC, Connor Hornsby, Michael M, Gooseneck, Ruckus, Josh Wilford, Ollie James, Caesar Vicario, Cartoon Logic, Wildnar, Jacob Chadwick, Jerry Lee, Andrew Davenport, Reaganomics Lamborghini, Tommy Boy, Ben Fellas, Jared Gibbs, Kyle Evans from Walsall, Rainbow Bullet, Astral Helix, Lemon Tarts, Michael Navarro, Triple Flim Flam 101, Uriah Carter, Road Weary, Renzo Menzo, Wojciech, Jennifer Doon, Rule Govella, Kelly NG Bonalfalco, and Anti Moistlow. And once again, a massive shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching.